Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're going to give a few minutes for everyone to get in before we get started. Well, looks like we still have a few people joining. Thank you for your patience. All right, I think we have most of our attendees in. For the sake of time, we'll go ahead and get started. So good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us as we provide an update for the swing space at 1703 North Beauregard Street. During tonight's meeting, we do have interpretation services available in Amharic, Arabic, and Spanish. To take advantage of interpretation, you're going to select the small globe at the bottom or top of your Zoom screen and select the language for which you will need. I'll have my Spanish interpreter go ahead.
Buenas tardes, bienvenida a esta reunión acerca de el 17 tratando de espacio que van a asignar. Si ustedes necesitan español, por favor, de abajo de la pantalla y seleccione español, van a ir en simultánea en muchas gracias.
I'm sorry, that came through a little broken. Can you do that again for me, please, for my Spanish interpreter?
Necesitan interpretación en español, por favor, seleccionen el logo en la parte de abajo de la pantalla.
I'm sorry, I think we lost our Spanish interpreter. We'll wait for her to come back on. My Arabic interpreter, go ahead.
Yes. مساء الخير، نشكركم جميعا الحضور معنا اليوم بدنا الاجتماع هذا مزود باللغات المترجمة الفورية الثلاث، الأمهرية والعربية والإسبانيولية. إذا كنتم عم تحضرونا من الكمبيوتر، رجاء الضغط على إشارة الكرة الأرضية في أسفل الشاشة لاختيار اللغة المناسبة لكم، وهي الاستماع مباشرة باللغة العربية مثلا في هذه الحالة. إذا كنتم عم تشاهدونا من التليفون، رجاء الضغط على إشارة النقاط الثلاثة في أسفل الشاشة، وكمان اختيار السماع عبر الإنترنت، بعدين اختيار اللغة المفضلة وهي العربية للسماع مباشرة باللغة المناسبة لكم. وشكرا مرة ثانية على الحضور معنا.
Thank you. Our Amharic interpreter, go ahead.
أنا أستلين ينكوان وده 1703 نورث بورغارد ستريت ስላለ ቦታ ለመነጋገር ባዘጋጀነው ስብሰባ በደህና መጣችሁ። ዛሬ የትርጉም አገልግሎት ተዘጋጅቶላችኋል። ስለዚህ ዓለም ቅርጿን በመንካት አምሃሪክ ወይንም አማርኛ የሚለውን በመጫን አገልግሎት ታገኛላችሁ። ሴልፎናችሁ ላይ ከሆናችሁ ደግሞ ሶስቷን ነጥብ በመንካት አማርኛ አምሃሪክ የሚለውን በመንካት የትርጉም አገልግሎት ታገኛላችሁ። በድጋሚ እንኳን ደህና መጣችሁ።
Thank you. And our Spanish interpreter, go ahead.
Bienvenidos a esta reunión. Si necesitan interpretación en español, por favor seleccionen el globo en la parte de abajo de la pantalla y seleccionen español y pueden recibir interpretación simultánea en español. Muchas gracias por estar en esta reunión. Did that come
Mhm. Thank you so much. So in addition to interpretation, tonight's meeting will also include polls so that we can garner some feedback from the community. So we really want you all to stay engaged and be prepared for those polls that will come up throughout the presentation so that we can get your feedback. At the close of tonight's presentation, we will have a Q&A where we'll be able to answer some of the questions that you have relating to the project. Please feel free to insert questions into the Q&A chat. You'll see it at the bottom of your screen as the presentation is going on so that we'll be able to answer them towards the end. And with that, I will turn it over to Azuka.
Thank you, Artia. Good evening, everyone, again, and thank you for joining us this evening for the 1703 North Beauregard Street Swing Space Project update. On tonight's agenda, we're going to go over our team introductions quickly. We'll provide high-level timeline and budget information on the project. And our design team will provide a design update where we are seeking your input, as Artia had mentioned. And then we'll do a quick swing space logistics considerations page, and we'll go over next steps and questions and answers at the end of the presentation. Just a quick reminder to our presenters, as we do have interpretations available, we'll be speaking on a slower pace so our interpreters can keep up with our presentation. From ACPS, for this project, we have our team members available: Erica Gulick, our Executive Director of Facilities; Azuka Bartlett, myself, Director of Capital Programs, Planning and Design; Sophie Humer, Principal Planner, Artia Funderburg, CIP Communications Specialist; and our Architecture Engineering team is represented by Karen Giaconda, Senior Associate with Perkins Eastman team. And we do have City of Alexandria staff members also in attendance. Next slide, please. We've presented the slide before on the timeline for the project. Currently, we are in the retrofit phase of the Swing Space project. As you're aware, currently we are working on design and closely collaborating with our city partners on the permitting process for the project. The design and permitting process will continue through the end of the year, and we are projecting to start construction for this project later on this year in winter of 2023. The projected construction completion for the project is late 2024 or 2025, and which would make the space available for swing space use for George Mason. And once the use is completed for George Mason Elementary School use for swing space, it will be consecutively used for the Cora Kelly School of Math and Science and Technology as a swing space. The current plan for phase 2 for the building, we would have a phase 2 currently planned for the year of 2029 through 2031 for the retrofit, and the new school occupancy in the year of 2031. The overall budget for the project, we have $24.5 million allocated for this project from FY23 budget, and we have requested additional $5 million in the proposed FY 2024 CIP budget. Currently, it's under consideration with the school board with an adoption that's scheduled for tomorrow. With that, if the adoption proceeds, we will have about close to $30 million for this project budget. And the funding for the permanent school use for phase 2 is budgeted in FY 2033 fiscal year. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Karen for design update.
Thank you. So when we start our architectural projects, we always come up with a series of design principles. And these design principles were prepared via interaction with some of the stakeholders. We did a kickoff meeting, a sustainability kickoff meeting, and a stakeholder focus group. And there were representatives from the Capital Programs Planning and Design Group, as well as principals from each of the schools that are involved in the future swing space, as well as Ferdinand T. Day Elementary School, which is right across the courtyard from this property. So talking a little bit about the design principles, high performance learning environment, we're looking for an energy efficient building and one that's healthy for the kids. We want to make sure that there's flexibility at multiple scales. That's not only for the swing space, but for its future use yet to be determined. We want to make sure we're supporting dimensions of well-being that include air quality, water quality, nourishment, access to natural light and fitness, etc. For responsible stewardship of resources, that includes not only our environmental resources, but also obviously our budget and schedule that we have. We want to make a positive and connected culture. This is a great opportunity to create more of a campus between two schools. And then of course, we want to make sure we're providing a supportive teaching environment for everyone that works in the building as well. This is a very transitional time and we know that can be stressful. And so we want to make sure that's as easy as possible. As far as the program goes, if you're not familiar with the building, it's an existing commercial office building and it's 4 stories high. The first story is going to have an existing tenant. It's the Goddard School, they're a preschool. And so they're going to remain there while the swing school is in operation. Looking at how we're stacking the big program, which is represented here in tones of orange and red and teal. We're starting with the kitchen on the first floor adjacent to the loading dock. There's also a secure entry so that there's a welcome center there and you can enter through the first floor. As you go up to the second floor, dining is directly stacked above that. So there's going to be easy transport of food to the second floor. As you go up one more level, that's where our multi-purpose fitness space is going to be. It's right across from the art room. And then the 4th story will have our library with the best views out, as well as our music room, so we can take advantage of a little bit of the ceiling height. All of those different portions of the building are going to be connected by the yellow bar that you see there, which is a third stair that we're providing for the building. And so there's lots of circulation that we'll be working with the schools to accommodate. Everything else is going to be classroom space and support space for the students. So we think that this is a really great opportunity to stack program and make sure that students are moving throughout the building during the day. Because I mentioned that this is a transitional time, we wanted to come up with an interior concept that really represented what we're our connection to nature, as well as creating an environment where kids can feel safe. So our interior concept is called Nest. We wanted it to be a welcoming refuge for students who are coming from the other side of town. We wanted to highlight the connection to nature. Winkler Preserve is right next door, and so we have great views out to there that we wanted to really highlight. And we also wanted to create some moments of delight, places where kids can come together and have points that are recognizable on every floor. So for different color palettes, and this is a way that you can get involved in the design process, we've come up with 2 different color palettes. The first is called Sunset Field. And the idea here is that it's a warm color palette. So warm colors are happy, they provide optimism, and they also encourage kids to be energetic in a positive way, really focused towards learning. And so we have 2 palettes that we built that are associated with that. The first one is based off of this field with flowers. So if you can go to the next slide. So we're pulling in colors from the sunset as well as from the field. We wanted to make sure that we were not giving a nod to George Mason Elementary School and Cora Kelly Elementary. So we've tried to pull in an interpretation of their school colors with green and yellow and red. We are using a bright white to help with the light bouncing around the space, and also a wood texture to really bring the warmth into the school. The next palette is more of a harbor scene, again with a sunset. And so there's a few fewer colors, but they could be used for wayfinding on every floor, or just points of connection. For our second mood, we came up with daytime forest. So this is again kind of a nod to the Winkler Preserve. And this is going to be cooler colors. So they're calming, relaxing, maybe a little bit more reserved, but obviously with pops of those warm colors, especially in the fall. And so we put together two different mood boards for that. The first is based off this view of a wooded street. So again, trying to pull in some of those existing school colors, but with a little bit more of a modern edge. And then in our second palette for this one, we focused more on the mountains that you can find in Virginia and the colors that are pulled from there. So generally a cooler palette with a little bit of a burst of red. And so we'd love to give you the opportunity to chime in about which of these four palettes you like. So we have Sunset 1, 2, 3, and Forest 1 and 2. And if Artia, maybe you can pull it towards the center so we can see the four palettes. I don't know if you're allowed to pull the poll.
All our attendees should
Oh,
be able to
yeah,
move the
can
poll
move.
away from the presentation slide. So if
Yeah.
the poll is in the way, you can kind of slide it towards an area that is not kind of blocking your view.
Thanks.
Okay, it looks like, oh. Still getting some answers coming. Okay, I think we got all the feedback on that one.
Thank you.
Oh, still got one more, hold on.
Okay, so moving on, one thing that I forgot to note, but I want to mention here is that the swing school will be able to accommodate 425 students. And all of those students will be coming from a different part of town. So that's a good segue into our site plan. So many of our students are going to be coming from the top of this page down onto the campus, and we will have bus access to the site, which is shown in orange. We're going to be using the current bus loop for drop off and pickup. Parents may be driving their students here, and so they can also enter the site from that side and use the yellow bus, yellow parent drop off loop. And then finally, there will be access to some play spaces. So we have planned for a natural playground that's towards the center of the campus that could be shared after hours between the two schools or used during the day by the swing school. We're also working right now with our cost estimators to determine if we can provide a second playground location, which you can see on the top of your screen. And if we have that, it will be a fenced playground that has equipment that's for slightly older students. So there's lots of access points to the site, and we're working on overall circulation and coordination with Ferdinand T. Day. So we have another opportunity to chime in about the different equipment. So for the natural playground, generally we see these spaces for the younger students. So we're starting with kindergartners here. We have equipment that can be used for interactive games, for balance, climbing, music, and crawling. So really focused on some of the large scale motor skills.
Karen, can you define natural playground?
Sure. So a natural playground is generally a little bit lower to the ground. It has structures where kids aren't going to fall as far. We also often have different types of material on the ground. So there might be a mix of rubber flooring and some more textural components like mulch and dirt. It just gives students, especially younger students, the opportunity to touch and feel elements of nature.
Thank you. All right, so we have a little over a minute on that one, so we'll go ahead and move on.
All right. And then should we be able to include the larger playground in the budget, we wanted to share some additional playground equipment with you. We have one structure that's meant for climbing and sliding, additional opportunities to play music. We have one that spins that you could spin with a group. We have some that are for cooperative play. We also have some balance structures, 2 different types, one that probably wiggles and one you can hop on. And then finally, we have some opportunity for tactile play. So these are some of the options that we could see in the larger playground. We'd like to see what inspires you here. And I'm going to pass it back to Azuka to talk about some of the logistics.
Thank you, Karen. So from our previous presentations to our community, there were a lot of questions related to transportation. So we wanted to provide a few key points in here. All of our students will be transported to the swing space. So for George Mason Cora Kelly, we'll be transporting all our students again to the 1703 North Beauregard Street building. Currently, we are working with our design and engineering team on traffic impact analysis. We're reviewing the information with internal and external stakeholders, as well as coordinating with the City of Alexandria staff members. And this exercise will inform us if there are any adjustments need to happen on site or around the site to accommodate any additional traffic or traffic that comes with the school use for the project. We are coordinating with Ferdinand T. Day as well as the Goddard Preschool. And as part of the consideration, we may use staggered timelines for dismissal and arrival. And that will be evaluated as part of the reduction of congestion to ensure safe and efficient access to our campus for our parents and students. Okay, next slide, please.
Okay, so next steps in communication. The design phase of this project is ongoing. Our next community meeting will be anticipated to be in the fall of the new school year. Communications will be regarding the project will continuously be made available on the capital programs planning and design webpage. There is a on the right side of the webpage, there all of our main projects are listed there, and there is one for the swing space. So information will be made available on that webpage as well. If you have not already done so, I encourage you to sign up for our CIP newsletter, which comes out on the first Monday of every month, and it details significant updates on all of our capacity and non-capacity projects. Contacts for the project are Azuka Bartlett, our Director of Capital Programs Planning and Design, Sophie Humer, our Principal Planner, and myself, Artia Funderburk, CIP Communication Specialist. All of our emails are there for you to get in contact with us if you have any questions. And at this time, we will open it up for questions. So our first question, what happens to the schedule / plans if we don't receive the additional $5 million?
So currently, the proposed superintendent's proposed budget does include the $5 million for school board adoption. And we have it's the budget has been approved by the city council, which included the $5 million additional request. So our anticipation is that the additional funding will be provided for this project. Erica, if there's anything you want to add to that, please feel free to.
Nope, just that the school board is voting on that budget tomorrow. So we anticipate having a final response on that tomorrow. The funding was identified as a need for this project in order to be successful based on inflation. So the funding is required to complete the project.
Okay. And the next question, I believe we answered during the presentation, but it was a question relating to students being bused to the swing space. All students will be provided transportation, and whether or not the students will have an outdoor play space, which we have gone over that there will be a play space provided for the students. The next question. How will George Mason be able to keep the building secured as it does now when there is another tenant occupying the space? What adults will be allowed into the building and how will lockdowns work?
I'll start on this and then I'll turn it over to Karen. So the way how we are designing the building, it will have two separate entrances, just like how we designed Ferdinand T. Day. It's a multi-tenant building. On first through fourth floors, we have a school building and we have a separate entrance for the 5th and 6th floor office tenants. So in similar way, we have kind of divided the first floor of the building with two separate entrances. So the Goddard Preschool will have its own dedicated entrance, and the swing space school use will have its own dedicated entrance. And the users will be kind of confined in those two uses, so there won't be any commingling of the users of the spaces. Karen, if you want to kind of elaborate on that.
That is true. There's also a specific question about what adults will be allowed into the building. Currently, we will have a safe and secure vestibule like all the ACPS properties where any adults that come to the building will need to enter through that visitor center, and then they'll be escorted upstairs to the main admin suite if that's appropriate. Our next step in the design is meeting with user groups. And so we'll be discussing safety and security, especially at that time. And we can talk about lockdowns and how we're going to manage it in the building as well.
Thank you. Can we talk a little bit about the space for physical education as we've considered in the design of the building?
Yes, we have created physical education space on the 3rd floor. We wanted to make sure that there was an acoustic separation that was appropriate, and what it was next to would be acoustically separated. There is a lower ceiling height than we typically see in a multi-purpose space, but there is a lot of space there that we can use creatively to align with the curriculum. So again, our next step is going to be to meet with the physical education instructors and the team to determine how we can best utilize that space.
Yeah. For the playground space, will there be room for field play like kickball or soccer, and or any type of blacktop space? This is a special quality of the current George Mason space that would be nice to replicate in some way, especially for the older kids.
So the site has, again, very tight constraints. And we're looking with our design team every opportunity and possibility to provide outdoor play space, playground spaces available. We're working with, again, with our city partners on what available options we have on site plan. So there's multiple things we're taking into consideration. Having said that, there are very, very limited, if any, options really for blacktop or sort of open space on site. There is, some of you might be familiar, there is a sort of a basketball open space available for Ferdinand T. Day. We'll work closely with our Ferdinand T. Day leadership to see if there is any opportunities for shared use of that space.
Thank you. Is the anticipated playground space big enough that current recess schedules will not be impacted? For instance, can multiple or will multiple classes be able to fit there at once?
This is not something that we have scheduled yet. And it's a great question that we're going to take into consideration and work with our landscape architects to make sure we can maximize the 2 playgrounds.
Thank you. What will be the after-school care option?
The after-school care options, we haven't determined that. We will be working closely again with our partner organizations and provide that detail to you at a later time. That has not been determined at this time.
Can you talk about the timing of when George Mason students will be transitioning into the swing space? We are being told it will be mid-school year. If this is the plan, how do we do that without being minimally disruptive to the students and the staff?
Hey, Azuka, if I could jump in here. So there's several questions about timeline, and I completely understand those questions and where they're coming from. Especially when we're dealing with construction, it is hard for us to set a firm date on when that would happen. We're currently targeting that the swing space construction would be done sometime during the 2024-2025 school year. When that's done, if we're already ready to be starting construction on George Mason, then there may be a mid-year move that we would be looking into in order to save the time on construction and to reduce our costs there and to get everybody back into the new George Mason as soon as we can. So that's why, if it seems vague, it's because we don't necessarily know yet. The other option is that we could move at the start of the 2025-2026 school year. I know that could be easier. We have done winter moves before when we needed to. So as we move along through the George Mason design process, which will be kicking off this fall, we'll have more information on the timeline of that, and that will really drive some of the timeline that we have here. We'll also have to take into consideration the Core Kelly project as well. So I appreciate the question, and we'll certainly, it came through in multiple, I think every way that question could be asked, it came through. So we certainly hear you and understand wanting to know that component of it. As soon as we know, we'll certainly share. Just please stay in touch with us and stay tuned into our community meetings, because as that information and those construction schedules become more clear, we'll be able to further define that.
Thank you. How will staff parking needs be met?
So we have a parking garage available at 1705 North Beauregard Street building. And the parking garage has enough capacity to handle staff parking for both schools.
Thank you. What type of accessibility is included in this design for those with mobility issues, considering its multi-level design?
That's a great question. So one of the major site items that we're doing is we're planning to add a ramp to the new entry. So like Azuka said, there's going to be separate entries for the Goddard School and for the new swing space. And that ramp wasn't there before, so we're going to be adding that. Beyond that, we do have 2 elevators that are passenger elevators that are right in the core, right across from the restrooms that are on every floor. And we also have a freight elevator that we'll be using primarily to put food onto from the first to the second floor, but could also be used in case there needed to be a stretcher or something else in the facility. Everything else is fortunately all at one level once you get to the next floor.
Thank you. Where are the pickup spots for busing? Now that question would be for transportation, and they aren't on the meeting, but once the project, construction of the project is complete and we do have a timeline for when George Mason students will be in, then bus stop information will be available 2 weeks prior to the first day of school. That's how it's been every year because we have to take into account enrollment, projected enrollment, and so making sure that every student has access to transportation. So we don't know right now what the bus stops will be, but we will be working with our transportation department to determine stops for all students. Do we have dimensions of the playground area?
So I pulled it up and they are a little bit oddly shaped. So I can provide the dimensions to the ACPS team after the meeting, but I can provide the areas. So for the natural playground, which is towards the center of the courtyard, we have 2,000 square feet for that. And then for the playground towards the north end of the site, we have about 4,700 square feet for that.
In addition to the play space, will there be outdoor access to a field?
I think I would reiterate what Azuka said. With the site being as tight as it is, it's going to be very difficult to provide a true field or blacktop space on the site.
Thank you. At what point in the planning process will we find out if the second playground is happening or not? Is that decision based on budget or site planning or both?
So we have been working with a cost estimator during schematic design, and we plan to receive their next set of budgets next week. So we'll be speaking with ACPS about the viability of it as it relates to budget. As far as site planning goes, we have met with the City of Alexandria and talked to them about our proposal. And in general, it's a favorable proposal. So we anticipate there wouldn't be a major issue with taking it through permitting should we have the budget for it.
Thank you. So we did get a question. There seems to be a kitchen space. Will there be a school cafeteria? If not, where will students eat breakfast and lunch?
Yes, there is a cafeteria space. It will be on the second floor. So the kitchen where they're preparing all the food is on the first floor, and then they'll be taking the food up into a servery, very much like what you may already have, where there will be 2 serving lines. The students can grab their food and then eat in the cafeteria space.
Tia, can you go back to the slide that had the floor plan blocking diagram? That might be easier to visualize.
Great. So what you can see on level 1, that's the kitchen. So that's just for the nutrition staff. And then the serving and student dining will have a traditional serving line and then all of the dining space for the students there.
Thank you. It looks like the welcome visitor area is downstairs. Will there be additional staffing provided to man the front desk?
So the visitor check-in zone that you can see here on the first level is very generous. And we did that intentionally to make sure that we had staff that could welcome students and also be there as just a general security presence. So we'll be working with ACPS to ensure that it's the right staff in that space. Additional admin space is on the second floor where it's in a combined suite and also distributed throughout the floors for security and oversight.
With the dropping enrollment of George Mason, is it possible that this project gets shelved to prevent more children being pulled to private schools?
I can respond to that, Azuka, if you want. So the answer to that is no. We have significant needs at George Mason to replace that school, not only from a capacity for the division lens, but also due to the school's age and the educational adequacy of the building. So we will be moving forward with this project. Just a reminder that in case you don't know, the board has a policy that they will review school boundaries, attendance zones with every 5 years or with the opening of a new school. And so with additional capacity provided through this project at George Mason, the school board would likely look at potentially expanding that boundary.
Thank you. The school currently screens visitors for safety prior to them entering the building. Will this be the same case in the new location? Yes. Yes.
Yes, we will be providing the same setup as Karen mentioned, with the safe 2-layer sort of secure entrance. Everybody will be going through the same check-in process as it happens at any of other schools. So it'd be exactly the same setup. In addition to that, I do want to mention that with all our new projects, we do include security cameras and card access, as well as part of our standard requirements for our all new school facilities.
Is there space for outdoor events like a harvest festival or a multicultural night that a PTA might want to host?
So one of the cool things that we're able to do, if we're able to renovate the north part of the site, is create an amphitheater type space that could be used for that. We also still will have the courtyard space between the two schools that might be a really great place for community to come together. And at the school itself, between the cafeteria and the multi-purpose space, as well as the library, those are 3 key spaces where events could be hosted inside the building.
How was the site determined? 3 campuses in one place without an outdoor area seems limiting.
So it is definitely a different model. It's more of an urban model school. We do already have Ferdinand T. Day Elementary School, and that school has been very successful. The design actually of the office buildings, some of the cool things about it is it enables us to bring in more light. It does create more of a vertical distribution of students. But it's working for us at one school. We did need to identify a swing space, and this was really the only location we had for George Mason. We had a lot of conversations about whether or not we needed a swing space for George Mason, but there was a strong advocacy from the community to not have to build the new school where the existing park is behind George Mason. And so for that reason, we needed swing space. This was somewhat of the only site we identified. And as I mentioned, there are benefits. We already have a lot of parking on site. We're able to collaborate with Ferdinand T. Day Elementary School. We've already figured out kind of bus and student drop off and pickup at this location. And so yes, playground will be a challenge, but we do have some existing playgrounds associated with Ferdinand T. Day on the site. We are looking into what additional we can do. We have Winkler Preserve right next door, which we're engaging with them on any potential partnerships. And John Adams is right across from North Beauregard Street as well. I apologize to the interpreters. I was speaking way too fast. So the playground space we knew was going to be a challenge going into this. And it is one that hopefully we'll be able to be successful in providing adequate playground space at this location.
Cora Kelly has a fantastic habitat and garden. Is it possible there is space for a small school community garden?
Yes. We can discuss that with our landscape architects.
Will PE always have to be indoors?
I don't think so, but I think it's a great question for when we speak with the end user groups and the teachers. So I will add that to my list of questions.
Thank you. Will there be a committee with representatives from George Mason and Cora Kelly to advise on the details of the swing space design?
So as this project is a swing space for multiple schools, we are working with our principals and other team members within ACPS and coordinating and working with them and having meetings. There will not be an official sort of advisory group per se for this project, but we're closely coordinating with all our stakeholders.
It doesn't sound feasible for the school staff to pack up and unpack and set up classrooms in the middle of the school year. Can you give an idea of how a transition during the school year would look? Will it require the school to be closed outside of assigned holidays and breaks?
So I can jump in. I know that Artia, you've actually been through this before, so you could probably speak to it too. But we did move Patrick Henry mid-year. It actually was originally intended to be moved over winter break, and then it didn't end up happening until Martin Luther King Day weekend. But it is a challenge to do that. Either way, we're dealing with teacher, whether it's a summer move or during the school year move, teachers have certain contracted hours and our students have certain days that they go to school, and we do try to work around that. It could work like paying teachers to come in over a weekend if they're willing to do that. It could look like paying teachers to stay after school. We have not, I don't believe, closed school on a certain day, but maybe there's additional support on a certain day that could be provided as far as substitutes or something so that teachers are able to do more of the packing up. And we hire the capital programs planning and design team would hire a relocation consultant as well as actual movers to physically move everything and to coordinate all of that transition. So we provide as much support as possible. We coordinate around the school schedule and what works best for them. Artia, I don't know if you want to add.
I do. So I was a staff member at Patrick Henry when we transitioned in the middle of the school year, and it actually went quite smoothly. The Office of Capital Programs Planning and Design did have a representative that helped be basically a liaison between the moving company and the staff. They came in, they bought boxes, and on a particular day, they came in and I said, this is everything that needs to go in a box. They put everything in a box for me, put it on wheels, and marked my name and classroom on it, and rolled it out of the door. And then when we came back, it was already in my space. And once we were in the new building, we were, I believe some staff, we did have substitutes that came in on light work days so that they could assist with the students, and teachers used that time to unpack small things. And we were compensated for any additional time outside of contract hours. And that was optional to unpack our items as well. So it went quite smoothly, and the office did provide a lot of support to make that happen. Let's see. Can you give an example of a staggered time for schools in the swing space? What time might schools start? So I can actually speak to this too. I worked at Patrick Henry when Douglas MacArthur moved into their swing space. And it takes a lot of coordination with the office as well as between the two campuses and the principals. And we worked out where Patrick Henry started at our original time at 8 o'clock, and Douglas MacArthur's start time was about 30 minutes behind that. So we would have buses coming in through the bus loop, which is the back of the school, and then parent pickup was in the front. And we had that time all the way up until we tried to get them out of there by 7:59 on the dot. And at that time, direction was going in front of Patrick Henry and out one entrance. It would be blocked off so that traffic could come in the opposite way, and parents could circle around the back of the Douglas MacArthur swing space and drop their students off. And they still maintained their bus lane in front of the swing space. So it took coordination between both campuses, and it worked really smoothly for the past, I want to say, been there 2 years. I left a year ago. So it's gone smoothly, and every time I visited, they have a really good handle on it. So with close coordination with Ferdinand T. Day, it's definitely possible.
And so, and that is a 30-minute difference. So at this campus, it might look the same, where Ferdinand T. Day starts at 8 a.m. and George Mason starts at 8:30 a.m. Again, that's something that has to be coordinated with transportation, and just keeping in mind that all of those students, including students who are currently in a walk zone, I saw that question as well, would have a bus identified. And so some of that time would be spent on the bus, but that is currently our thinking around staggered start times.
George Mason will have 2 district-wide autism classrooms starting next school year. How will the swing space accommodate the needs of the teachers and students in those classrooms?
So students in citywide autism programs use standard classrooms, and that's what would be provided in the swing space as well.
Can the existing George Mason green space still be left open for kids in the community to use during construction of the new building?
Given that we would have to sort of look at design and the location of the green space and see which part of the site we would have to develop, but I think that it would be very unrealistic expectation, just because we would have to look at the whole site and come up with a plan that works with the new school design, the site plan. There is many requirements that come with the site plan requirements and the play space, stormwater requirements and utilities, and all of those things would have to get coordinated. So it would be very difficult to provide access to the existing site during construction.
Just to add to that, that we'll have a lot of conversations about the design of George Mason and the construction of George Mason at those community meetings once those get started. This, I appreciate bringing it up here. I just want to make sure that community is reassured that this isn't the only place, and you'll have we'll be able to have a lot of those conversations come the fall and into next school year.
Is it a possibility that students could be bused to aftercare at other ACPS schools closer to the neighborhood, closer to their home neighborhood?
And I think we have received this question a couple of times before. As I mentioned, we don't have all the details ironed out for after school program. We'll definitely take this into our consideration for planning and make it as easy as possible for our parents and for our students to shorten that time frame. But currently we do not have that answer for you to provide on sort of what after school programs will be available at other locations that are closer to George Mason or Cora Kelly.
How was the decision made to use the same space for coinciding school swing spaces?
I'll jump in here. So there's a couple questions that I think are similar to this, and I apologize if we caused any confusion. George Mason and Cora Kelly will not be in the swing space at the same time. George Mason will come in, we will rebuild George Mason. George Mason will go to their new school. And once they have vacated the swing space, Cora Kelly will come in and then use the swing space. There will be no sharing of teachers or any, there's a few different things referenced. The space is to be used for one school at a time. I think Artia, maybe we have time for one more and then we probably got to wrap up.
When do you anticipate starting meetings for the modernization of George Mason?
So George Mason design funds are budgeted in FY24. Again, once that funding is approved by the school board, we'll have access to those funds available in the fall of 2023 this year. So we'll start on the design process this fall. Once the design process starts, we'll start setting up our community meetings and start the engagement for that project.
Okay. If there are any additional questions that you may have at the close of tonight's meeting that you did not get a chance to ask or that may come up later on, this presentation will be available on the 1703 Swing Space webpage. Once the recorded portion of the video is closed caption, that will also be made available for viewing on the webpage. If you have any feedback as it relates to the color palette and the playground polls that we presented tonight, you can feel free to email that feedback to me directly. My email is here, artia.funderburk@acps.k12.va.us. We have, right before we close, I'll just share a little bit of the poll options. So for the color palette, it looks like Sunset won and Forest won for a tie at about 38%. For our natural playground, climbing, balance, and interactive games were the most important. And for the playground equipment for the older students, climbing and sliding, as well as cooperative play, balance, and spinning were the most important. Now, as I stated, this will be made available. So if there are any community members or families and parents that were unable to attend tonight's meeting, they will be able to view this presentation on the webpage and they can email their feedback to me directly. We will be continuously working on this design and taking feedback from the community because it is important that you all feel comfortable in the swing space. We thank you all so much for providing feedback and asking your questions. We hope that we answered them. If not, again, feel free to send me an email and we'll do our best. We thank you so much and we will see you all in the fall and we hope you have a wonderful summer. Good night.
Thank you.